Breaking news, you're looking at video of one of the last times Oscar winner Gene Hackman, a known recluse in recent years.
Now with new details on the investigation into the death of actor Gene Hackman, including newly released video.
As for the inside footage, Hackman's estate wants to block that release, citing privacy.
About that inside footage, Hackman's estate is trying to stop it from coming out, saying it would invade their privacy. Inside the hidden tunnel beneath Gene Hackman's estate, it gets so cold that every breath turns into a little white cloud in the air. Wet dampness clings to the rough stone walls, and a heavy, spooky silence fills the whole hallway. There's no wind. No sounds come down from the big house above. Just every once in a while, you can hear water dripping somewhere deeper in the dark. By that time, federal investigators had already found 2 bodies inside the house. They had noted a library that was a mess, a safe that was left unlocked, and furniture that looked like it had been pulled away from where it usually sits. They thought they had already found the scariest part of the case. Then somebody spotted a secret doorway hidden behind a wall, and the whole investigation suddenly went a different direction. Nobody tied to the property, not the workers, not the neighbors, and not even the local police, knew this underground tunnel was even there. That one find made the investigators rethink everything they thought they had figured out. Gene Hackman, one of Hollywood's most loved and respected actors, had clearly worked very hard to keep this hidden room a secret. For many, many years, he almost pulled it off. What was waiting down those stone steps was never meant to be seen, and what it hinted about the man behind the famous career was only just starting to come out. Before we keep going, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Everything began on the morning of February 26, 2025. At exactly 11 o'clock in the morning, a line of federal trucks rolled up to a tightly secured estate hidden in the wooded land outside Santa Fe, New Mexico. Behind reinforced steel gates stood a big $4 million property that belonged to 95-year-old Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his 65-year-old wife, Betsy Arakawa. For several days, nobody had been able to reach them. Phone calls went unanswered. The workers weren't given any instructions, and what was usually a busy estate had gone completely silent. For a place known for its strict privacy and carefully managed daily routine, the sudden lack of any activity immediately stood out. Surprisingly, it was not a family member or close friend who first called the police. The worry came from a handyman who contacted sheriff's deputies because he believed something terrible had happened inside the house. When the officers arrived, they had to break in by cutting through the locks, a small detail that immediately caught the investigators' attention. This wasn't the kind of estate where the doors ever ended up unlocked by accident. Every single part of the property had been built for safety, with access controlled almost completely from the inside. As the officers stepped into the mansion, they got ready for what they thought would be a sad but simple situation involving an older couple who lived all by themselves. Instead, they walked into a scene that raised questions right away. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were found dead inside the house along with one of their dogs. The authorities later said that Betsy had died about 1 week before Gene. According to the official report, she died from a serious viral sickness, and Hackman's death was blamed on heart failure along with other natural causes. On paper, the investigation looked finished, but many parts of the scene were hard to match up with such a simple answer. Think about this for a moment. From the very beginning, the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office said publicly that there was no sign of anything suspicious. At the same time, the investigators thought the situation was unusual enough to do a huge forensic check of the whole estate. Those two things together naturally made people even more curious. If everything looked normal, why would they do such a big, careful search using special investigation methods? The story of what happened also didn't quite add up. If Betsy had died nearly 7 days before Gene, that meant the 95-year-old actor may have stayed inside the mansion with her body for an entire week. During that time, there were reportedly no emergency calls, no calls asking for help, and no communication with the outside world. What could explain such a long silence? Was he confused? Was he grieving? Was his health getting worse? Or was it something the investigators hadn't figured out yet? As the investigation kept going, attention shifted away from the sad deaths and toward the estate itself. If even some of what the authorities reportedly uncovered under the property is ever fully proven true, the case could end up being one of the most amazing celebrity investigations in American history. But before we look into what lay hidden underground, it's important to understand the property above it. Gene Hackman's Santa Fe estate was way more than a regular house. It was built for privacy, security, and keeping everyone away. A place that acted less like a normal home and more like a fortress that was carefully guarded. It wasn't just a quiet, hidden mansion. It worked more like a heavily secured facility. Thick forests surrounded the property on every side, while tall stone walls closed the estate in. Motion detectors guarded every entrance. Heat-sensing cameras watched over the grounds, and around-the-clock surveillance created a level of security that many people compared to a high-security government installation. The people who worked there were carefully chosen, fully checked out, and required to sign very strict confidentiality agreements. Remarkably, even after decades of employees, including gardeners, cleaners, and maintenance crews, not one of them ever publicly told anyone what went on behind those walls. In today's world, where private information often spreads online in seconds, that level of secrecy is almost unheard of. It didn't happen by accident. The mystery went past the workers, too. Reports about requests for construction permits contained huge blacked-out sections, while property records had unexplained gaps that puzzled researchers. According to local stories, one historian who worked with the Santa Fe Historical Society spent months going through papers about the estate, and then suddenly stopped her research. She supposedly stopped answering her co-workers and never published what she had found. Whether she uncovered something big or just abandoned the project has never been publicly explained. When the investigators finally stepped inside the estate, they found a home unlike anything they had expected. The inside was jaw-dropping. Hallways showed off priceless artwork, old-fashioned furniture filled room after room, and fancy chandeliers lit up spaces that seemed frozen in another era. Outside, carefully kept gardens held super-rare plant species that you can only find in a few places on Earth. Architectural historian Dr. Elena Vasquez, who later helped look over the property, was reportedly struck by the unusual design. After reviewing the way the estate was laid out, she said she had looked at countless historic homes all across the Southwest. Yet, this one felt totally different. In her view, it looked like a world-class museum hidden inside a fortress. Every beautiful detail was matched by fancy security features, suggesting the estate had been designed not just to impress, but also to protect something of exceptional importance. That impression only grew stronger as the investigators watched body camera video that was released after a rare court order let the public see parts of the investigation. As deputies moved through the mansion, the heavy silence was impossible to miss. But it wasn't the quiet that first caught their attention. It was the clues that somebody had already gone through the house before they got there. Heavy furniture had been pushed across the hardwood floors, leaving fresh scratch marks behind. Books had been pulled off the shelves and carelessly put back in the wrong order. Cabinets and drawers stood open, while a bedroom safe sat unlocked and completely empty. Every room pointed to the same unsettling possibility. Someone had either been desperately searching for something or trying just as hard to make sure it disappeared. Then the investigators walked into Gene Hackman's private library. That's where the investigation changed forever. Hidden inside one part of the library wall was a secret entrance so perfectly built into the wall that it could easily be missed even after years of visiting the room. This wasn't a normal hidden door pretending to be a bookshelf or hiding behind a painting. According to the investigators, the lock had been carefully engineered and needed a specific way to open it. Whoever designed it clearly only wanted a small number of people to ever find it. Past the hidden entrance was a narrow stone hallway that led downward into complete darkness. There were no lights and no visible air shafts, just an old staircase carved in stone going deeper under the estate. The federal agents carefully began their descent. With each step, the temperature kept dropping. The air felt heavier, with a damp, metallic smell mixed with the scent of old stone and rust. Moisture covered the walls, and the beams from their flashlights swept across the passage, until something suddenly made the lead investigator freeze in his tracks. The walls themselves were covered with markings that had been carefully carved into them. These weren't random scratches or just decorations. Every symbol looked deliberate and very precisely engraved. Some looked like ancient alchemical symbols, while others looked surprisingly similar to very detailed technical diagrams. One section seemed to show the design of a strange machine, with gears, chambers, and pieces that all connected together in patterns that the investigators had never seen before. One forensic specialist reportedly said the strange drawings looked less like old artwork and more like blueprints for technology that seemed completely out of place. Even the way the tunnel was built hinted at a complicated history. Near the entrance under the library, the stonework looked like how people built things in the middle of the 20th century. But as the investigators went farther underground, small changes in the stonework suggested that parts of the passage might have come from a much older structure, raising even more questions about when the tunnel had really been built and why it had stayed hidden for so long. The first section of the tunnel looked surprisingly modern. The investigators saw clean, straight construction lines, hard reinforced concrete, and industrial materials that suggested fairly recent renovations. But the deeper they traveled underground, the more the passage seemed to change. Smooth walls slowly gave way to rough stone. Reinforced concrete disappeared, replaced by hand-cut rock marked with chisel and pickaxe marks instead of modern tools. Structural engineer Marcus Devlin later looked at photographs reportedly taken inside the passage. After carefully studying the images, he came to a remarkable conclusion. In his opinion, the upper part of the tunnel had clearly been updated and made stronger in modern times. But the deeper sections looked way older. His assessment suggested the original tunnel already existed long before Gene Hackman ever owned the estate. Instead of building it himself, he may have simply inherited what was already hidden under the property. Eventually, the investigators reached an underground chamber. What was waiting below them looked as though it had been untouched for generations. The massive room had rows of old wooden crates stacked along the walls. Several of them had fallen apart over time, scattering their contents across the stone floor. Faded papers, rusty metal objects, and unusual artifacts lay half-buried under thick layers of dust. Many of the items were hard to fit into any known time in history. One investigator carefully opened a dust-covered crate and uncovered a collection of old photographs. Their edges had curled up from age, and the faces in them were completely unfamiliar. The clothing people wore suggested the photos had been taken many decades earlier. Some photographs appeared to show private gatherings inside dimly lit rooms without windows. Others showed unfamiliar buildings and underground locations that the investigators reportedly could not figure out right away. One image in particular got a lot of attention. It showed several men gathered around a large table covered with maps, lit only by a single overhead light. Written on the back was the year 1937, followed by a single handwritten word in a language that nobody could read. That writing on the back reportedly added another layer of mystery to the collection. Nearby, the investigators found leather-bound files held shut by worn straps. Inside were pages with coded dates, mostly blacked-out names, and mentions of events that didn't show up in any publicly available historical records. Some pages had been partially burned, suggesting somebody had tried to destroy the papers but didn't finish. Other files showed insignia tied to organizations that had officially shut down decades earlier. There was just so much material that it was truly overwhelming. According to estimates, fully documenting everything stored inside the chamber could take months or even years of careful examination. As the investigators looked at the room more closely, they noticed that the stone floor itself had something unusual about it. Instead of plain rock, the surface had been carved with fancy circular designs that stretched across the whole chamber. Seen from above, the patterns looked like detailed star maps. They appeared to show constellations, planetary paths, and how the stars line up in space, all laid out with remarkable precision. The carvings showed a level of careful math planning that suggested real intent, not just simple decoration. Whoever created them seemed to be recording information, not just making the chamber pretty. A second investigative team later focused on another puzzling discovery: the tools stored inside several of the crates. Many had engraved markings that didn't match any known manufacturer's label. Some had really fancy mechanical parts that seemed unusually advanced for how old the surrounding tunnel looked. One object in particular, A small cylindrical metal device with several spinning rings inside it caught the investigators' attention. It showed no visible seams or any clear signs of being put together, giving the impression that it had been formed as one single solid piece. Former FBI forensic analyst Dr. James Whitfield, who had spent nearly 2 decades studying classified evidence, later commented on the very limited public information about the investigation. Thinking about how unusually quiet the officials had been, he suggested that when authorities sharply cut down public talk after an investigation, it often points in one of 2 directions. Either the investigators decided there was nothing important to report, or they found something so important that decisions about releasing information moved past the investigative team itself. Based on what had become public, he believed the situation deserved closer attention. The location of the estate added another interesting layer to the story. The land around Hackman's property is known not just for its scenic desert landscapes and busy arts community, but also for being close to one of America's most historically important research regions. Just a short distance away sits Los Alamos, the birthplace of the Manhattan Project, where groundbreaking nuclear research changed world history. During the Cold War, big underground building projects took place all over parts of northern New Mexico, and declassified government records confirmed that many reinforced facilities and protected infrastructure projects were built across the region. Just how big that underground network became is still something historians are curious about. And that wider context naturally fueled more guessing about what else might still be hiding under the land around Hackman's secluded estate. The deeper the investigators explored, the stranger the tunnel became. According to reports, parts of its steel framework looked similar to the materials used in high-security construction during the 1950s. Some observers argued that features like reinforced walls and inward sealed doors seemed way more advanced than what you would normally expect in a private storage area. If that's true, it raises an obvious question. Why would an underground space under a hidden mansion be built with that level of protection? Former Department of Energy consultant Richard Payne, who worked on facility assessments in northern New Mexico during the 1990s, later suggested that parts of the region still contain forgotten underground structures dating back to the Cold War. While many facilities were officially shut down, others, he noted, were sealed up or taken off public records, leaving their true purpose mostly unknown. Local residents claimed they sometimes heard strange, low-frequency vibrations under the area late at night. Some believed the sounds came from deep underground, while others brushed them off as normal noise. Over the years, stories of mysterious trucks arriving after dark and strange activity around the estate only added to the guessing. During a later search of the property, investigators reportedly uncovered a hidden communication system that appeared to connect the mansion with a secret underground section. Whether it ever served any real purpose is still unknown, but the discovery fueled even more questions. People who knew Gene Hackman personally painted a very different picture. They remembered him as friendly, humble, and deeply connected to his community, making the mystery around his final years even harder to understand. Throughout his career, from the French Connection to Enemy of the State, Hackman played men who were surrounded by secrets and conspiracies. After his passing, many couldn't help but notice the spooky similarities between those fictional roles and the unanswered questions around his own story. Officially, Hackman died of natural causes at the age of 95. Yet, speculation continued after reports claimed investigators found a hidden tunnel that may have been used shortly before his death. At the far end of the passage, they reportedly discovered a massive sealed iron door, but what, if anything, lay beyond it has never been confirmed. Months later, very little information about the reported underground area had been released publicly, which let countless theories spread. Whether the silence reflects a routine investigation or simply the absence of proven evidence still isn't clear. One thing, however, is certain: Gene Hackman is no longer here to answer the questions himself. If there were ever secrets beneath his estate, only he may have known the whole story. What do you think? Was it all just guessing, or is there more to this mystery than meets the eye? Drop your theory in the comments and hit subscribe for more mystery stories.